The Baskerville sword techniques were nothing like simple cuts or thrusts. They tore through flesh and shattered bone, leaving wounds so grotesque that other clans feared the Baskervilles for the sheer strangeness of the injuries they inflicted. The knight's last strike had nearly taken Vikir's entire shoulder, the gash running deep enough to slice through his clavicle and down to the sternal portion. Only his regenerative abilities spared him from losing the arm entirely. Dropping to one knee, Vikir steadied his shoulder, his gaze locking unflinchingly on Corso. The 8th technique was only a step beyond the 7th. Yet Vikir found himself unsettled. The regeneration he had gained from the basilisk outside the tower felt extremely slow. He checks on his arsenal, the Beelzebub glutton of flies and canine tooth. The first was the deadly poison of Madame Eight Legs, an S-tier ability. The second, immortality from the basilisk, also ranked S-tier. The last, silent heal from Mushushu, was an A+ tier ability. Even with all of these, he realized time was not a luxury he could afford in this fight. Smoke curled from Vikir's gaping wound as he fixed his glare on the formidable knight before him. Corso stood motionless. Memories from another time flooded Vikir's mind, one family, one nation. During the Age of Chaos, when only one family ruled like a single kingdom, the strongest count out of the 7, the man who led the Baskerville family back in their prime, the one who turned his back on the world after pursuing power, is Corso le Baskerville. The knight who stands before us now. Vikir forced himself upright, panting heavily as the pool of blood at his feet began to crust and dry. His voice was raw with strain as he demanded to know if the knight before him was truly Corso le Baskerville. In a voice as cold as the metal he wore, Corso gave a sharp yes. Tilting his head slightly, he asked through his bandaged mouth who Vikir was. Vikir clenched his teeth in frustration, his wound still knitting itself back together, and muttered his name, Vikir. Vikir van Baskerville. The old knight leaned forward, a glimmer of intrigue in his stance, repeating the name with emphasis on the middle word. Van, not le. The distinction stirred questions in Corso's mind as he studied the young man before him. It was astounding. Vikir had reached the highest domain before even maturing. Not only that, but he carried the demon sword Beelzebub, a weapon long believed lost since Corso's time. His sharp gaze flicked to the wound he had inflicted, watching in disbelief as it regenerated even after being struck by the 8th technique. "What an absurd fellow you are," he remarked. Vikir's expression hardened into a scowl as he shot back that the only absurd one here was the knight himself. Having lived 2 lives, Vikir never imagined he would face someone who truly mastered the Baskerville 8th technique. At first, he couldn't sense the knight's presence. Nor could he detect any sign of life force. But the moment Corso revealed himself, the aura he radiated felt as if it could tear Vikir's skin apart. Recalling the last strike from the knight, Vikir was certain of one thing. He had no chance of winning this battle, at least not yet. Taking a slow, steady breath, Vikir asked if this was the same knight who had created the lurking ambush technique and sought to understand the old knight's true power level. Gripping his sword's hilt tightly with both hands, Corso decided to unveil his full strength. He focused his energy and drove his blade into the ground with such force that the earth shattered beneath him. The air around them stilled as he began to unwrap the bandages covering his face. His head bowed slightly. Corso spoke in a low voice, describing how he had mastered the 7th technique by accepting the emotions, joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure, all intertwined in a complex dance. That was how he acquired the 7th technique. As the tight bandages loosened and slipped away from his face, revealing scarred skin beneath, the old knight continued his tale. He explained that during his battle with the basilisk, he had been on the brink of death, and it was only his intense will to survive that allowed him to acquire the 8th technique right before he died. His words grew muffled in Vikir's ears as disbelief and dread widened his eyes. The bandages fell to the ground near the sword he had plunged into the earth. Corso's face was half charred to the bone, the skull exposed. One eye socket was hollow while the other burned with a crimson glow. He went on to say that after mastering the 9th technique, he became a Death Knight, the embodiment of death itself. Death Knight, the outcome of a knight who possessed noble power and mentality and was engulfed by the abyss. After crossing death's door, they continue to fall for eternity until their bodies crumble due to the dimension's mana and their soul disappears. Vikir's throat tightened and he swallowed hard, terror flooding through him as his face drained of color. The 9th technique. Was that truly the highest mastery a swordmaster could reach? His eyes remained fixed on Corso, who stood silently, his gaze unflinching and locked onto Vikir. Corso had accepted death in order to reach that level. Corso lowered his eyes and spoke again, revealing that he was not the creator of the lurking ambush. The reason? He had never obtained the 10th technique. His eyes drifted to his hand as he recalled a passage from an ancient tome. To claim the 10th technique, one must die once and return to life. Though he had died, he failed to revive himself. Because he couldn't revive himself as his body had turned into the body of a death knight, so he became trapped in the tower they were in now. Sweat beaded and trickled down Vikir's face as he absorbed the old knight's tale. With a slow, steady voice, he asked how someone like him could become trapped. "Where is this place? Who imprisoned you here?" "You know nothing, boy," Corso snarled, raising his sword, the tip aimed sharply at Vikir. There was no way to find out because no one knew of this place. Corso lowered his head and told Vikir that this place was the Grave of Swords, where the life and death of the first Baskerville patriarch were forever intertwined. The first patriarch had been born in a place called the Cradle of Swords, and here was where he had met his end. This was the inevitable place where those who seek the ultimate truth of the sword would find themselves, the grave where a true Baskerville meets their demise. Vikir's presence here was proof that fate had drawn him to this place. A scowl formed on Vikir's face as he questioned what fate had to do with any of this. Corso then answered Vikir's earlier question about who had imprisoned him. It was the tower itself. The tower restrained him, preventing any escape. Entrusted with the role of undertaker for the Grave of Swords, Corso greeted true Baskervilles who came here. Over time, he had realized that a true Baskerville, one marked by fate, would come to find him. Only such a person could release Corso from this endless timeline. His wounds nearly healed, Vikir finally asked whether the fated person Corso spoke of was none other than himself. Resting his hands upon the pommel of his sword, Corso met Vikir's eyes with unwavering conviction. He believed Vikir could master the Baskerville 10th technique. But to do so, Vikir would have to experience death in their battle. With deliberate slowness, Corso drew his sword from the ground, its blade shimmering with a cold, merciless light. Until their duel reached its end, Vikir would not be permitted to leave this place. To Corso, this was destiny. He would kill Vikir, and Vikir would kill him. For only through such an exchange could the 10th technique be claimed. His expression shadowed, voice turning as cold as steel, Corso declared that this was the only way Vikir could free him, because this was the destiny the tower itself had chosen. Vikir reignited the Beelzebub sword, dark crimson wisps seeping from its edges like smoke from a dying fire. Bringing the blade close to his face, he cloaked himself in a shroud of red mana. His eyes locked with Corso's and, in a low, commanding tone, he declared that fate was boring. Only his own choices were worth trusting. A surge of power exploded from Vikir's body as he shifted into an aggressive stance, fully resolved to kill Corso and escape this place. Corso said nothing, his posture firm and his sword ready. In the next heartbeat, Vikir vanished, closing the distance in a blur that left only a gust of wind in his wake. Yet Corso did not move. Vikir reappeared mere inches away, blade raised for the kill. The Death Knight's gaze stayed locked on him, unwavering even in the face of the incoming strike. With a flicker of fury, Corso prepared his counter, his thoughts seething. Was Vikir truly mocking the very essence of fate? Before Vikir's blade could descend, Corso struck with startling speed, driving the palm of his hand into Vikir's jaw. The impact snapped Vikir's head back, but he didn't fall. Gritting his teeth, his vision blazing with rage, he could barely fathom that the Death Knight had deflected him without even drawing his weapon, using only his bare hands. Corso moved without hesitation, his sword flashing free in one smooth motion. He swung in a fierce cutting arc, the strike carrying not just force, but a question. Could Vikir truly defy his fate? Vikir reacted in time, bringing his weapon up to block. But the impact was brutal. The collision sent him hurtling backward. The sting of the blow burned through his arms, and a frustrated thought bit into his mind, so much for ambushes. Vikir's eyes widened at the incoming danger. The Death Knight closed in. He scolded Vikir coldly for daring to catch his breath in a battle where a single lapse meant death. The next strike came with surgical precision. Vikir's instincts flared, and his blade rose in time to meet it. Steel clashed, ringing sharply in the still air. Every blow from Corso carried a terrifying weight. With each exchange, Vikir felt the gap between their skills. Instead of breaking him, the clash only hardened Vikir's resolve. His jaw clenched, his focus narrowing to a single point. He had to push through the crushing pressure, relying on the techniques he trusted most, both before and after his regression. Determination burned in his eyes as he readied the fourth Baskerville technique, the one he knew best. Across from him, Corso caught, for the briefest flicker of a moment, a glimpse of Vikir's true potential. This was fate in its purest form, a level of mastery and depth no one his age should possess. Yet from the instant Vikir had stepped into the tower, Corso had known this was the chosen one. The Death Knight's grip tightened on his sword, his stance sinking lower as power coiled along the steel like a drawn bowstring. He would meet Vikir's challenge with the fifth Baskerville technique. The air between them crackled, their killing intent rising like a storm about to break. Corso's slash came down with devastating force, a blow that left no room for escape. The power behind it dwarfed Vikir's own. The strike crashed through his defense, pain lancing through his body and wrenching a cry from his lips. Still, he did not yield. Teeth gritted, eyes gleaming with defiance, Vikir surged forward. Every drop of mana he possessed poured into his blade as he prepared to unleash the sixth Baskerville technique. Corso stood unmoving, unshaken, and advanced to meet Vikir head-on. He made no move to evade. Instead, he chose to counter, channeling the seventh Baskerville technique. The clash was brutal. Before Vikir's blade could find its mark, Corso's sword thrust forward like a spear of condensed mana, piercing straight through Vikir's chest. The impact sent him hurtling across the battlefield until his body slammed against the sword statue with a bone-jarring crash. Blood poured from the deep wound, his coughs wet and ragged. None of his strikes had landed. Every attack had been dodged. Every exchange tilted in Corso's favor. Raising his blade, Corso gathered a mana so fierce it bled into the air as red and black lightning crackled along the steel. He was a monster unlike any Vikir had ever faced. Locking eyes with him, Corso's gaze was a silent challenge. Take this blow if you dare. Vikir didn't waver. Wrath burned in his eyes as he launched forward, summoning the seventh Baskerville technique. But Corso was already 2 steps ahead. He drew upon the ninth Baskerville technique, driving his sword into the ground. Dark mana erupted from the impact, spilling outward like a living shadow, swallowing the battlefield. The slash moved with crushing inevitability, slow but impossible to avoid. Vikir's eyes widened in shock. There was no room to escape. The blow struck. Agony unlike anything he had ever known tore through him, his vision dimming as the color drained from his face. Corso's mana wormed its way through every vein, every nerve, burning and ripping him apart from the inside. The crimson-stained sky broke, sunlight streaming across the field as Vikir collapsed to his knees. His body was torn with deep gashes, his strength utterly spent. His eyes rolled white, his mouth hung open in silent pain. And then, slowly, his body slumped forward, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The aftermath of Corso's ninth technique left a deep crater where they had stood. Corso watched in silence, disappointment shadowing his features. Blood pooled around Vikir, soaking into the dirt. His shoulder and back bore wounds that left him drowning in his own lifeblood. Time blurred. Minutes passed before Vikir's eyes cracked open. He floated in a sea of crimson, weightless in a drift, the battlefield gone. Before him stood a door, unfamiliar, foreboding, its frame glowing as pure white light spilled through the threshold. He had no idea where he was.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.